Hi, for this week's video pastoral message, I want to share with you a story that John Ortberg actually articulates in a book, a real life story about prayer. If you want to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat. Doug Coe has a ministry in Washington, D.C. that mostly involves people in politics and statecraft. And Doug became acquainted with a man called Bob, an insurance salesman who was completely unconnected with any government circles. Bob became a Christian and began to meet with Doug to learn about his new faith. One day, Bob came in all excited about a statement he'd found in the Bible where Jesus says, "Ask whatever you will in my name, and you shall receive it." "Is that really true?" Bob demanded. And Doug explained, well, it's not a blank check. You have got to take it in the context of the teaching of the whole scripture regarding prayer. But yes, it is really true. Jesus does really answer prayers. "Great," Bob said. "Then I've got to start praying for something. I think I'll pray for Africa." That's a kind of broad target," Doug said. "Why don't you narrow it down to one country, perhaps?" "All right, I'll pray for Kenya." "Do you know anyone in Kenya?" Doug asked. "No," replied Bob. "Have you ever been to Kenya?" "No," replied Bob. Bob just wanted to pray for Kenya. So Doug made an unusual arrangement. He challenged Bob to pray every day for 6 months for Kenya. If Bob would do that and nothing extraordinary happened as a result of the prayer, Doug would pay him $500. But if something remarkable did happen, Bob would pay Doug $500. And if Bob did not pray every day, then the whole deal was off. It was a pretty unusual kind of prayer program, but then Doug, the minister in Washington, D.C., was a creative minister. Bob began to pray, and for a long time nothing happened. Then one night he attended a dinner in Washington, and the people around the table explained what they did for a living. And a woman that was present at the dinner said she helped to run an orphanage in Kenya, the largest of its kind. Bob saw $500 suddenly sprout wings and begin to fly away, but he could not keep quiet. He roared into life. He hadn't said much in company up until this point, but now he spoke relentlessly with question after question. "You're obviously very interested in my country," the woman said to Bob, overwhelmed by his sudden barrage of questions. "Have you been to Kenya before?" "No," replied Bob. "Do you know someone in Kenya?" "No," replied Bob. "Then how do you happen to be so curious about my country?" "Well," Bob said, "someone is kind of paying me $500 to pray." She asked Bob, would you like to come and visit Kenya and tour the orphanage? And Bob was so eager to go, he would have left that very moment if he could. And when he arrived in Kenya, Bob was appalled by the poverty and the lack of basic health care. Upon returning to Washington, he could not get that orphanage out of his mind. He began to write to large pharmaceutical companies, describing to them the vast need he had seen in that place. He reminded them that every year they must throw away large amounts of medical supplies that remain unsold. Why not send them to this place in Kenya, he asked. And some of them did. The orphanage received more than $1 million worth of medical supplies, and the woman called Bob up in Washington and said, "Bob, this is quite amazing. We've had the most phenomenal gifts because of the letters you have written. Would you like to fly back over and attend a large gathering, a party? Will you come?" And Bob said yes. And he flew back to Kenya. And whilst he was there, the president of Kenya came to the celebration because it was the largest orphanage in the country and offered to take Bob on a tour of Nairobi. In the course of the tour, they came across a prison, and Bob asked the president about a group of prisoners there. "They're political prisoners," he was told. "That's a bad idea," said Bob. "Perhaps you should let them out." And Bob finished the tour and flew back home to the United States. Sometime later, Bob received a phone call from the State Department of the United States government. And the voice on the other end of the phone said, "Is this Bob?" "Yes," Bob replied. "Were you recently in Kenya?" "Yes," Bob replied. "Did you make any statements to the president about political prisoners?" "Yes," Bob replied. "Well, what did you say?" "I told him he should let them all out." The State Department official explained that the department had been working for years and years to secure the release of these prisoners to no avail. Normal diplomatic channels and political maneuverings had led to a dead end. But now, the prisoners had been released, and the State Department was told it had been largely because of Bob. So the government was calling Bob to say thank you. Several months later, the president of Kenya made a phone call to Bob. He was going to rearrange his government and select a new cabinet, so he asked if Bob would be willing to fly over to Kenya and pray for him for 3 days whilst he worked on this very important task. So Bob, who was not politically connected at all, boarded a plane once more and flew back to Kenya, where he prayed and asked God to give wisdom for the leader of the nation as he selected his government. And all this happened because one man dared to get out of the boat. How about you? What are you praying for? Walking on water is perhaps not some great thing we will do. In fact, by ourselves we can do nothing of lasting value. It's about what God longs to do with us through God's power and grace. But first of all, we too have to step out of the boat. "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Stay safe and well, and may your God be with you.